Hey guys, Uncommon Ramen here. In keeping up with my inspiration on Commander decks, I figured I'd do another quick deck tech on an Azorious deck that I was working on. I had been playing in the black red, black blue red colors for a while now, and noticed that I was kind of neglecting white and in actually every form. And when I sat down and thought about it, I thought about color pairings, and I'm not a big fan of green white. I'm not a big fan of red white, and I'm not a big fan of black white either. Despite the fact that, as far as monocolors go, my favorite color is white. So I don't know why I don't like the color pairings that go with white, except with the exception of Azorious, which is blue white, which I do enjoy playing. And I don't know if that's because I like to have control, like to have that edge of control that counter magic gives you. But at the same time, black white should have a decent amount of control too, in the form of spot removal. So I'm not really sure why the white color pairings aren't typically on my list. Green white for me, I avoid because I don't know. It just seems like there are better ways to do token generation and swinging wide. I mean, black green seems to do that really well with squirrels, and it just feels like there's different ways to do it. And I'm not a big fan of Boros either, because honestly, Boros always seems to have a pretty singular idea of what it's trying to do, which is basically swing in with that commander and get some commander damage in. It's really easy to make a Boros Tron deck, is what I guess I'm saying. But needless to say, I did just decide to do a blue-white deck, and we're going to be looking at a blue-white deck using Kangee, the Aerie Keeper. Part of the reason I chose this as my commander is because it is difficult to build around, and not a lot of people are building with it. Kangee is an older card that, specifically Aerie Keeper itself, has never been reprinted. It was from the invasion block, and because it was still old bordered, it does not have the current creature denominations. Like this right here says creature angel. Kangee is just a summon legend. So I had to go check for the Oracle text, and the Oracle text has since redefined it as a bird wizard. So it is a creature bird wizard. Its old text said that when you kicked it, it would get X feather counters on it, and birds you control would get +1/+1 for each feather counter on that. That also has since been addressed by Oracle text, saying that all other birds get +1/+1 for each feather token on Kangee Aerie Keeper, and that is simply just to make sure that Kangee itself does not benefit from his +1/+1 counters, and therefore make him less overpowered, I guess. I'm not really sure. So in this deck, we're going to try and swing wide. We're going to create as many bird tokens as possible, and we're going to use Kangee to kind of close up the game, because we're running flyers, and flyers are notoriously hard to deal with in Commander. It seems like it stands to reason that you would build up an army of flyers, and then when you see an opportune time, you online that Kangee for a maximum amount of counters, and then swing in for game. So some of the things we're going to be looking at in here are anthem effects like Vanquisher's Banner, and I think there's Horn of the Herald in here as well. We're also going to be looking at I think it's called Favorable Winds. These are cards that I don't actually have in person yet. They are on their way. And we're going to take advantage of things like gravitational shifts, so we can take flying away from our opponents to make it even harder for them to deal with us. Some of the cards that I do have in hand here, Stoneforge Masterwork is kind of a backup plan. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control that shares a creature type with it. So we're going to call birds here. Well, you don't have to call anything, but obviously we're trying to synergize with birds here, and this is a good way to swing in with a single creature for a lot of damage. It costs 1 as well, so it's something that you can fetch out with Urza's Saga if you need to. We also are going to be looking at cards like Lofty Denial. We also, well, I guess we'll go into it, but Lofty Denial counters a spell unless its controller pays 1. If I control a creature with flying, it counters the spell unless the controller pays 4 instead. And since we're playing flying, this thing is going to be always for the maximum. We have Commander Isha. Commander Isha, I'm sorry, I have the Japanese version here, has flying and protection from creatures. That is all he is, a 2/4 body with flying and protection from creatures. He's also a bird. I think he's just a summoned bird, but I'm not 100% sure because I'd have to look up the Oracle text again for that. We have Ameria Angel, and this is landfall create bird tokens, so we're just bird creature tokens, so we're literally just trying to get the maximum amount of little flyers that we can get on the board as possible. We're going to run the Empyrean Eagle. For the same reason that I mentioned before, we want as many anthems as we can, and this says other creatures you control flying get +1/+1, so this is perfect for the deck. We have Isior Wardwing Familiar. Spells your opponents cast to target 1 or more commanders you control cost 3 more to cast. So this just kind of protects Kangee. So if you online Kangee and you don't manage to get victory on the swing, this just kind of helps you keep him in play, or at least forces your opponent to tap out more resources to get rid of it. We have the Gustcloak Savior. Gustcloak Savior is kind of one of those, it gives you the opportunity to swing out with everything without having to worry about things dying. As you swing out and your opponent starts to choose blockers, each of those creatures that would have been blocked that may die, you can just simply remove from combat, and therefore they live. And so it kind of just gives you an opportunity to be reckless without actually being reckless. Next up, we have Kangee's Lieutenant. Kangee's Lieutenant, when it attacks, attacking creatures with flying get +1/+1 until end of turn, so just it makes them beefier. Plus, it has the Encore, so we're just looking at trying to swing wide with big creatures. We have Kangee Skywarden. As I mentioned before, Kangee Aerie Keeper never got reprinted, so this is just a newer version of Kangee. This is Kangee Skywarden, and it says that whenever Kangee Skywarden attacks, attacking creatures with flying get +2/+0 until end of turn, and whenever Kangee blocks, blocking creatures with flying get +0/+2. So it gives, it has vigilance, so it can not only attack but block in the same, a round of phases. But at the same time, it also gives bonuses for both attacking and blocking, so it's got a really good way to protect you here. Next up, we're going to have Keeper of the Nine Gales. Keeper of the Nine Gales is a really good way to bounce out really huge threats on your opponent's board. More importantly, it can bounce out the flyers that they're trying to throw in front of you. It has flying, you can tap it and tap 2 untap birds you control to return target permanent to its owner's hand. And it's a permanent, so it doesn't necessarily have to be big creature threats either. It could be big threats in the form of like, what is that? Aether something reservoir, which is basically just a giant laser beam, or anything along those lines that just absolutely is going to cause problems. You can just bounce it. Then we have Skycat Sovereign. Skycat Sovereign gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control flying, so this guy can get very big very quickly. More importantly, it pumps out cat birds, so they still count as birds despite the fact that they're also cats, which means that they're still going to benefit from any bird tribal synergies. So that's just a really great way to get some tokens on the table. We have Steel Plume Marshal. When it attacks, other attacking creatures you control flying get +2/+2 until end of turn. So it's a more effective Kangee. The Skywarden Kangee, not the Aerie Keeper Kangee, simply because it gives +2/+2, so they get the toughness as well. But in a different sense, obviously Kangee, as far as defense is concerned, is much more powerful. Next up, we have Warden of Evos Isle. Creatures with flying cost you 1 less to cast, so this is just going to help me bring the cost down of these creatures that are already not super expensive so that we can get as many of them out there as possible and, again, try and swing wide. Next up, we have Watcher of the Spheres, which is, again, similar. Creature spells you control with flying cost 1 less to cast. And whenever another creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, so it can be a very aggressive flyer. Next up, we have Wingmate Rock. Wingmate Rock is definitely one of those things you want to cast on your second main phase after you've dealt damage, because when it comes into play with a copy of itself. And whenever Wingmate Rock, well, I guess it's not a copy, it's just 3/4 bird, because Wingmate Rock also has the raid ability and the whenever it attacks, you gain 1 life for each attacking creature. And so this is another great synergy with the flying, because again, we're swinging wide, we're going to attack with a lot of creatures, we're hoping to gain a lot of life from that. Aether Flux Reservoir. That was the word I was looking for. Aether Flux Reservoir. We have Azorious Charm. We got the ability to get lifelink to all my creatures. We have the ability to draw a card. We have the ability to put a attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library. It's very versatile. In worst case scenario, if you're in a bad position, you can respond by allowing yourself to draw a card and hope you draw into something like Swan Song, which is going to be in here as well. But the creatures you control gain lifelink is another great way if you're low on life, or if you just want to bolster your life to try and get in there for some damage and really get your life total back up. And again, you can put a attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library if you choose to do that instead. And that's just a good way to kind of either mitigate what's blocking your creatures, or to get a attacker that you just don't need on the field out of there. So it's a very versatile charm. Then we have our standard counterspell. 2 blue to counter a spell. There's not, I mean, obviously there's a bunch of free counters out there, but I'll take this over things like Rewind and other 3 to 4 cost counter spells. It's just very efficient. Next up, we have Path to Exile, and I do believe we also have Swords to Plowshare in here. There is something to be said about creature removal, and since we're playing white-blue, as far as like actual creature removal, besides things like bouncing a creature back to the opponent's hand, are very few and far between. So obviously things like Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares, and I believe Generous Gift is also in here, or going to be in here as well. So any kind of removal that you can get that deals with some of those bigger nastier threats, you have to run it. Next up, we have Alrund's Epiphany. Alrund's Epiphany not only creates 2 bird tokens, but it gives you an extra turn, and it has a foretell cost of 6. So you can potentially put that down on your second turn. I think it's second turn, right? Foretell is 2 colorless. I don't remember. You can put it down on your second or third turn, one or the other, and then just sit on it until you find yourself in a position where, getting that second turn could be the difference between winning and losing the game. Next up, we have Distant Melody. Distant Melody is a fantastic way to draw cards, especially for tribal decks. We call birds here, and, draw any numerous amount of cards. This is a great way to find an answer to shut out a game. It's not super good for responses, obviously, because it's sorcery speed, but it does give you a lot of options in your hand at a very quick point in time. Then we have Tezzeret's Gambit. Tezzeret's Gambit is another draw 2, but then we have the Proliferate thing. There's going to be a lot of +1/+1 counters being thrown around here, so Proliferate is just going to be another great way to pump up those creatures to make them more powerful. Plus, you get to draw 2 cards, and this could potentially be cast on turn 3 without using colored mana. Next up, we have Winged Words. In this deck, because we have creatures with flying, Winged Words is actually only going to cost 2 to draw 2 cards, and that is incredible value. 2 for 2 is unheard of. We have Azaria Signet, obviously, followed by Mind Stone. Soul Ring. Then as far as enchantments, I've got Dovescape going in here. Dovescape, at first, I was not going to play. And it was partially because I just didn't see the value. When I read it again, I read the part that I had misread the first time, which is whenever a player plays a non-creature spell. So originally I thought, and I don't know how I managed to get myself in that thought process, that it said whenever a player plays a spell. And that includes yourself. Which means, because it says non-creature spell, that means I can still play my creatures, which is a big part of this deck. It is a tribal synergy, and so once you get yourself in a position where you have basically what you need as far as anthems and whatnot are in play, you can really drop this into play and either utilize it yourself by playing things with high CMC just to get a whole bunch of white and blue birds into play, or on the other end of that, it stops your opponent from being able to play things like board wipes, spot removal, counter spells, you name it. Non-creature spells in general are just stopped. Now, the downside, of course, is that they're going to receive 1/1 white flyers. But here's where I see this as value, is that we have anthems on our side that are going to help create much bigger flyers. So while they still will have 1/1 flyers, they will be effectively just chump blockers. And so it still doesn't necessarily stop the swing wide strategy, although it can be used against you in a way that could be unfortunate if they're smart enough to use it that way. So Dovescape it's in there because reasons. It's a good card. I really need to see how it performs. We got Radiant Destiny. Again, it's part of those anthems. It's just about getting the anthems out there and getting some big flyers and swinging them in this case for birds. Next up, we have Reconnaissance Mission. It says, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. This is super important. I think there's another one exactly like it that doesn't have cycling, called Coastal Piracy. Super important because we're playing flyers. Again, there's not a lot in the way of answers for flyers, so the chance of you drawing cards from this is actually pretty high. Next up, we have Mu Yanling Skydancer. It's her -3, a 4/4 blue elemental bird creature token with flying. It's really good. If you manage to get her ult and get that emblem out there, Islands Control have tap to draw a card, which is incredible for getting those answers. It's got some really good utility in it. For lands, we got Animal Sanctuary, a +1/+1 counter on target bird, obviously. We also are looking at Command Tower, which is an obvious one. Deserted Beach, blue-white fixer. Glacial Fortress, blue-white fixer. Hallowed Fountain, blue-white fixer, also counts as an island or a plains. We got Irrigated Farmland, blue-white fixer that also counts as a plains or an island. We got Karn's Bastion, so we can take advantage of that proliferate. Get them out there as quickly as possible. We've got Path to his Ancestry, so we can get some scrying going, just to make sure we get our consistency. We have Prairie Stream, another blue-white fixer that counts as a plains and an island. Reliquary Tower, because when we're drawing cards, you never know when we're going to have way over our maximum hand size, and that could put us in a really bad position. We got Temple of Enlightenment, blue-white fixer with scry, so, just getting in there to fix what we have. Then we have Tranquil Cove, blue-white fixer, comes into play, gain a life. And then after that, we got our plains and our islands. The cards, there are quite a few cards, that I did not show you because I do not have them just yet, that are on the list. And amongst those, obviously, we have things like the Aven, I think it's called the Aven Mind Sensor. Aven Mind Sensor has flash, which means you can play it at any point in time. And it basically says that if your opponent was to search their library, they're going to search the top 4 cards of their library instead. So it's a really fantastic way to shut down tutors and ramp from green without being horrendously oppressive like opposition agent. We also, let's see. Yeah, most of this is actually going to be birds. When I have the birds in hand and I have the full deck done and sleeved, I'll do another video kind of showcasing what I've gotten here. I did choose to run monologue tax instead of smothering tithe for obvious reasons. Monologue tax, I think, is $5 right now, whereas smothering tithe is $40. Smothering tithe would definitely, under most circumstances, really help with the Kangee kicker cost. But I'm hoping to see smothering tithe get some good triggers in, and if smothering tithe, I'm sorry, not smothering tithe, monologue tax. I'm hoping to see monologue tax get some good triggers in. And if I can get some good triggers with the monologue tax, and it seems like it's working similarly, obviously not as powerfully, I might just stick with that. But there's still a chance I could switch it out for the monologue or for the smothering tithe. For those of you who don't know, monologue tax is basically the budget version of smothering tithe. We have obviously Soulcatcher's Aerie in here. Whenever I believe a flying creature dies, it could also just simply be whenever a bird dies, you put a feather counter on the Soulcatcher's Aerie, and other creatures you control flying get +1/+1 for each feather counter on it. So another fantastic anthem with a huge amount of power that can go behind it. It's also an enchantment, so not a lot of people are playing to destroy enchantments. We're also running Battle Screech, which is a flashback spell that puts birds into play. So you can get up to 4 of them after you flash back. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other big cards in here. I think that's really it. We, like I said, it's just pretty simple. Get a whole bunch of birds, get some tribals, anthems on the field, and then swing at your opponent for lethal. Like I said, when I get everything in hand and sleeved, I will do a big deck list and reveal of the deck. This is just what I had on hand at the time. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. And if you have any comments, questions below, or maybe you have some suggestions for the deck that I might not have added. Obviously, like I said, there's still cards that need to be added into the deck. So maybe hold that until after you've seen, because likely a lot of the suggestions will be something that's already in the deck. Go ahead and leave those comments down below. Let's keep it positive. I will be removing any negative comments. So guys, let's just keep it classy. No point in being negative. It just doesn't make any sense. And if you feel the need to support me, hit me up on my Patreon at patreon.com/uncommonramen, capital U, capital R. I do all of this in my free time, so any amount of support that I can get can help me bring more of this content to you more often. Yeah, so that's it, guys. Until next time, peace.